Hello there, my sleepy citizens. Tonight, we journey into the shadowed streets of Gotham City, where mysteries lurk and the Dark Knight stands vigilant against the forces of chaos. We bring you tales of Batman, uncovering different sides of the man behind the mask. And as our journey through these stories winds down, a calm ambience of Gotham's streets will carry you throughout the night, bringing you to restful sleep without interruptions from any ads. If you enjoy these tales, please be sure to give us a like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments what story you'd like to hear next. But for now, let's get cozy and step into the world of Gotham. Moonlight caught on the curling wisps of smoke still rising from what had once been the east wing of the Gotham Opera House. The grand dam of Gotham's cultural district stood wounded but defiant, her limestone facade blackened by flame, her ornate cornices reduced to ghostly outlines against the night sky. Batman moved silently across the rooftop of an adjacent building, watching as firefighters below conducted their final sweep of the structure. The blaze had been extinguished hours ago, but the air still carried the acrid scent of burnt velvet seats and charred wooden beams that had stood for over a century. "The fire marshal has cleared the scene," Oracle's voice came softly through his cowl. "They're calling it arson, but they don't know what you know." Batman's eyes narrowed as he focused on a peculiar pattern of burn marks along what remained of the Opera House's ornate dome. The scorch marks weren't random. They formed a distinct shape recognizable only from this elevated vantage point. The stylized outline of a bird with wings outstretched, rising from flame. "A phoenix," he murmured, "just like at the Botanical Gardens." "Third fire this month with the same signature," Oracle confirmed. "The GCFD is treating them as isolated incidents, but the evidence suggests otherwise." Batman fired his grapnel gun and descended into the cooling ruins of the Opera House. Landing with barely a sound on the charred remnants of the stage, he activated his cowl's analytical mode. The thermal imaging revealed ghostly patterns of how the fire had spread, not in the chaotic manner of accidental blazes, but with precision and purpose. Whoever had orchestrated this destruction had an intimate understanding of fire dynamics and architectural vulnerabilities. "Sir," Alfred's voice joined the communication channel, "I've been examining the structural plans of all three targeted buildings. There appears to be a commonality you might find interesting." Batman knelt to examine residue left on what remained of the stage flooring. "Go ahead." All three buildings were constructed during Gotham's post-Civil War expansion. They share an architectural feature: central ventilation systems that connect to the old city gas network. In their time, quite the modern convenience. Batman's gloved fingers brushed against an unusual substance embedded in the charred wood, not ash but something crystalline that had partially melted and reformed. "He's using an accelerant I haven't encountered before," he observed, "something that burns hot enough to consume evidence but leaves these crystal formations behind. Might I suggest collecting a sample for analysis?" Alfred prompted gently. As Batman carefully extracted a fragment of the crystalline substance, he noticed something else. A faint, rhythmic pattern scorched into the stage floor, visible only under enhanced vision. Not random burn marks, but deliberate, almost like musical notation, he realized. "He's burning music into the Opera House stage. How theatrical," Alfred remarked dryly. "Our arsonist seems to have a flair for the dramatic." Batman photographed the burn pattern and sent it to the cave's database. "Oracle, see if you can translate this. It might tell us where he plans to strike next." As he continued his investigation, Batman's thoughts turned to the growing pattern of destruction across his city. The botanical gardens had been first, its Victorian-era glass conservatory reduced to twisted metal and ash, rare specimens collected over decades lost in a single night. Then the abandoned church of St. Dumas, whose stone walls had contained the blaze but whose interior had been gutted, leaving only blackened walls, and the haunting silhouette of a phoenix rising from the altar. And now the Opera House, a cultural landmark that had survived 2 world wars, economic collapses, and numerous reconstruction efforts, each building a piece of Gotham's architectural heritage, each now bearing the signature of a fiery rebirth they would never experience. Master Bruce, Alfred's voice interrupted his thoughts. Fire Marshal Reynolds has just issued a statement to the press. I believe you might want to hear this. A news feed appeared in Batman's cowl display. Marshal Reynolds stood before a cluster of microphones, her expression grave beneath her uniform cap. The GCFD has determined that the fires at the Botanical Gardens, Saint-Dumas, and now the Opera House are connected and the work of a single perpetrator. We're dealing with a professional arsonist with expert knowledge of structural engineering and fire propagation. Behind Reynolds, Batman could see Catherine Vale, one of Gotham's most tenacious investigative journalists, pushing forward with questions. Marshal, sources inside the department suggest the arsonist is leaving a specific symbol at each scene. Can you confirm this is the work of the pyrotechnic criminal known as Firefly? Reynolds' expression tightened. We cannot confirm the identity of the perpetrator at this time. The investigation is ongoing. But what about the Phoenix symbols and reports that the accelerant used is military grade, possibly thermite-based? No further questions, Reynolds said, turning away as her public affairs officer stepped in to end the impromptu press conference. Batman switched off the feed, his suspicions confirmed. Firefly, he murmured, Garfield Lynns. Indeed, Alfred replied, former pyrotechnics expert for Gotham Light and Stage. Presumed dead after that warehouse fire 3 years ago, though they never found a body. He's evolved, Batman observed, studying the crystalline sample he'd collected. This isn't just about the spectacle of fire anymore. There's purpose behind these targets. As Batman prepared to leave the smoldering ruins, a flicker of movement caught his eye. Near what had once been the orchestra pit, a lone figure stood silhouetted against the faint glow of embers. For a moment, Batman thought it might be a firefighter, but the silhouette was wrong, too slender, and moving with a purpose that spoke of investigation rather than emergency response. He moved silently closer, keeping to the shadows. The figure, a woman, knelt beside a particular pattern of burn marks, photographing them with a professional camera. Catherine Vale, the journalist from the press conference. She wore sturdy boots and practical clothing beneath an oversized jacket, her dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. This is an active crime scene, Batman said quietly, stepping just far enough into the dim light to be seen. To her credit, Vale didn't startle dramatically. She turned toward his voice, camera still in hand. So is half of Gotham on any given night, she replied. But this one's different. He's telling a story with these fires, and nobody's listening to what the flames are saying. You mentioned thermite, he said. What makes you think that's the accelerant? Vale's expression shifted subtly, a professional recognition that they were now engaged in an exchange of information. The burn patterns, for one. The witnesses who described a white-hot flash before the main blaze took hold, and this. She held up her phone, showing a photograph of crystalline residue identical to what Batman had just collected, found the same formations at all 3 sites. It's not just thermite, it's something custom. You've been investigating all the fires. She nodded. Someone has to connect the dots. The fire department is overwhelmed and GCPD treats arson as property crime unless someone dies. Her eyes narrowed slightly. But you're not just starting this investigation tonight, are you? You already knew about the Phoenix signatures. Batman didn't confirm or deny. What else have you found? Play seemed to consider how much to share. The buildings aren't random. Each one was featured in a series of articles last year about Gotham's architectural heritage. Specific emphasis on buildings constructed during the 1870s post-war boom, when the city was rebuilding after the Great Fire. Batman's mind made the connection immediately. Buildings with architectural flaws that made them vulnerable to fire. History repeating itself. Exactly, Vale nodded, impressed. But here's what's interesting. The series was commissioned by the Burnley Preservation Society. They were lobbying for funds to retrofit these historic buildings with modern fire suppression systems. Instead, their publicity campaign created a target list for our pyromaniac. This was valuable intelligence, a potential source for Firefly's target selection. You should leave, Batman said. The structure isn't stable. Bave didn't move. There's something else. The Phoenix isn't just a signature. It's a mathematical formula for fire propagation. Each one is slightly different, like he's refining a calculation with each blaze. She hesitated, then added, I think he's building towards something bigger. These fires are just practice runs. The insight aligned with Batman's own developing theory. Garfield Linz had always been methodical beneath his pyromaniac obsessions. If these fires were indeed tests, the question became, what was the final exam? Go home, Ms. Vale, Batman said firmly, and be careful what you publish. You might make yourself a target. Something flickered in her expression. Not fear, but realization. You think he's monitoring media coverage, using the reporting to gauge the effectiveness of his fires. Before Batman could respond, a section of ceiling collapsed nearby, sending a shower of embers into the air. When the dust settled, Vale stood alone in the ruined opera house. Batman, having vanished as silently as he had appeared. Back at the Batcave, Bruce examined the crystalline sample under an electron microscope, while Alfred reviewed the architectural plans for the 3 burned buildings. The cave's multiple displays showed timeline analyses, chemical compositions, and thermal imaging reconstructions of each fire. The substance appears to be a modified thermite compound, Bruce confirmed, studying the molecular structure revealed by the analysis. But there's something else mixed in, a chemical that crystallizes as it cools, creating a secondary ignition point hours after the initial blaze. A time-dazed reignition, Alfred observed, designed to confound firefighting efforts and ensure maximum structural damage. Bruce nodded, moving to another workstation. He's refined the formula with each fire. The Opera House blaze burned hotter and longer than the previous 2, despite the building's superior fire containment systems. Evolution through experimentation, Alfred remarked grimly, practicing for something more ambitious, perhaps. That's what concerns me. Bruce pulled up the musical notation pattern he'd discovered. Oracle translated this. It's a fragment from Wagner's Götterdämmerung, the Twilight of the Gods. The final opera in the Ring Cycle, where Valhalla burns and the world is consumed by fire. Alfred's expression darkened. A rather ominous selection. There's more. Bruce brought up Catherine Vale's articles on the Architectural Heritage series. These buildings aren't just connected by their age or construction methods. they form a geographical pattern. He mapped the locations, connecting them with lines that formed a rough triangle across Gotham's downtown. The fires are creating a perimeter. A perimeter around what, precisely? Alfred leaned closer to examine the map. Bruce expanded the view, overlaying it with Gotham's underground infrastructure. The old city gas network. Most of it was decommissioned decades ago when Gotham converted to modern natural gas systems, but the original pipes still exist beneath the streets. And at the center of our triangle, the main junction valve for the historic system, Alfred finished, seeing where the analysis was heading, which, if I recall correctly, was never fully sealed off from the modern gas lines. A vulnerability that could be exploited, Bruce confirmed. If Firefly opens that junction and introduces his specialized accelerant into the old network, could create a chain reaction, Alfred concluded soberly. Multiple, simultaneous fires erupting across the original gas line routes. A firestorm that would consume the heart of old Gotham. Bruce's expression hardened as the full scale of the threat became clear. Not just destruction, rebirth through fire, the entire Phoenix symbolism taken to its logical extreme. A disturbingly grandiose vision, Alfred remarked. Though I suppose we shouldn't expect modest ambitions from a man who calls himself Firefly. Bruce began pulling on his cowl, preparation for the night's patrol already in motion. I need to find that junction valve before he does. Oracle is cross-referencing historical city plans with modern infrastructure maps, but some of those passages may have been sealed or modified over the decades. Perhaps Miss Vale might have additional insights, Alfred suggested. Her research into the architectural heritage series could prove valuable. Bruce paused, considering. She's already inserting herself into a dangerous investigation. Involving her further could make her an explicit target. With respect, sir, Alfred replied. From what you've described of your encounter, Miss Vale seems quite capable of finding trouble without your assistance. Better she has accurate information than continues her investigation blind to the full danger. Bruce acknowledged the point with a slight nod. I'll consider it. First, I need to examine the junction site personally. If Firefly plans to use it, he'll have made preparations. There might be evidence of his modifications already in place. As Batman prepared to depart, Alfred called his attention to one final detail. Sir, before you go, there's something about the timing of these fires that may be significant. Each has occurred on a date that corresponds to a historic Gotham fire. The Botanical Gardens burned on the anniversary of the Hyde Park blaze of 1882, Saint-Dumas on the date of the Cathedral fire of 1896, and the Opera House, the Great Gotham Fire of 1871, Batman finished, the pattern clicking into place. He's recreating Gotham's fiery history, building toward a culmination. He pulled up a calendar on the Bat computer, which means the next target will burn on tomorrow night, Alfred confirmed grimly. The anniversary of the Merchant Street conflagration, which nearly bankrupted the city's earliest financial district. Batman moved toward the Batmobile, purpose in every step. Then we have less than 24 hours to prevent Firefly from making history repeat itself on a catastrophic scale. The night air carried a hint of autumn's approach as Batman traversed the city, moving from sleek downtown toward the tangled streets of old Gotham. This area had evolved rather than been designed, its layout reflecting 2 centuries of growth, destruction, and rebirth. Buildings from different eras stood shoulder to shoulder, Victorian brownstones beside Art Deco towers, colonial churches overshadowed by glass and steel apartments, all of it built and rebuilt atop the bones of the original settlement, layer upon layer of Gotham's resilience in the face of disaster. Using Oracle's newly compiled maps, Batman navigated toward the central junction of the historic gas network. The entrance wasn't marked on modern city plans, likely forgotten by all but a few municipal engineers and historical preservationists. According to the overlaid maps, the primary access point would be in what was now Robinson Park, near the central fountain. "I'm approaching the coordinates," Batman sub-vocalized as he moved silently through the park's evening shadows. "Any updates on unusual activity in this area?" "Nothing from GCPD scanners," Oracle replied, "but the park's security camera network went offline approximately 40 minutes ago. Maintenance issue, according to the system logs." "Convenient timing," Batman observed, now more certain he was on the right track. The central fountain was a relatively recent addition to Robinson Park, installed during the post-No Man's Land restoration efforts. Its circular basin and modernist sculpture seemed unremarkable, but Batman's cowl sensors detected subtle inconsistencies in the stonework surrounding the water feature. One section of the decorative rim didn't quite match the weathering pattern of the rest. "Found it," he confirmed, examining the disguised access point. "The entrance has been modified recently, professional work, designed to blend in, but the mortar is newer than surrounding sections." Batman applied pressure to specific points around the disguised panel, and with barely a sound, a section of the fountain's rim slid aside, revealing a narrow maintenance shaft descending beneath the park. The opening was just wide enough for a person to navigate, with metal rungs embedded in the concrete wall leading down into darkness. "I'm going in," he informed Oracle and Alfred, switching to infrared. "Be cautious, sir," Alfred advised. "Those tunnels date back to the 1876th. Structural integrity may be compromised in sections, quite apart from any modifications our pyromaniac friend might have introduced." Batman descended into the darkness, the shaft extending nearly 30 feet below ground level before opening into a broader tunnel. The infrastructure here was a strange hybrid. The original brick-lined passages retrofitted over decades, with more modern piping, electrical conduits, and maintenance platforms. The main gas lines, long since decommissioned, ran along the ceiling of the tunnel, their cast iron bulk a testament to 19th century industrial ambition. Moving silently through the underground network, Batman noted signs of recent activity: boot prints in the accumulated dust, modern tool marks on ancient valve housings, and most concerning, newly installed devices attached at key junctions in the pipeline system. "Someone's been modifying the infrastructure," he reported, examining one of the devices. "These aren't city maintenance installations. Custom-built timing mechanisms connected to flow control valves. A delivery system for his accelerant," Alfred deduced, "positioned to ensure maximum dispersal throughout the network." Batman carefully photographed the device without disturbing it, sending the images back to the Batcave for analysis. "The craftsmanship is precise. Military-grade components, but with custom modifications. Definitely Lynn's work." He continued deeper into the tunnel network, following the main line toward the central junction. The air grew warmer, the humidity rising with each step forward. Somewhere ahead, water dripped rhythmically onto metal, the sound echoing through the brick passages. Batman paused, sensing something different about the acoustics of the space ahead. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber, the central junction where multiple gas lines from different eras converged. The original 19th century engineering had created an underground cathedral of industrial design, with vaulted brick ceilings and massive iron valves arranged in a circular pattern around a central control platform. And there, suspended from the ceiling in a modified harness, working meticulously on the largest of the junction valves, was Garfield Linz. Firefly had evolved his equipment since their last encounter. The flight suit was more streamlined, its surface covered with heat-resistant material that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The flamethrower apparatus was smaller, more integrated into the suit's design, but the most striking change was the helmet. No longer a simple protective mask, but an elaborate creation resembling a stylized insect head with multifaceted lenses that glowed with an amber light. Batman remained in the shadows of the tunnel entrance, observing. Linz worked with the focused precision of a surgeon, attaching what appeared to be a distribution mechanism to the central valve. Beside him, suspended in specialized containers, was a substantial quantity of the crystalline accelerant, enough to create a firestorm that could consume half of old Gotham if introduced into the gas network. "I've located Firefly," Batman whispered. "He's at the central junction, installing what appears to be the final components of his dispersal system." "GCFD units on standby," Oracle responded. "But if that accelerant ignites in the tunnel system, conventional firefighting measures won't be sufficient." "Then I'll make sure it doesn't ignite," Batman replied. "The chamber's acoustics would make a direct assault challenging. Sound would carry, giving Linz advance warning. But the complex network of pipes and supports offered multiple pathways to get closer without being detected." Batman began to move, using the industrial architecture to his advantage, closing the distance methodically. He had nearly reached the outer edge of the central platform when Linz spoke without turning around. "I wondered when you'd show up, Batman." Firefly's voice was altered by his helmet, given an unnatural resonance that echoed in the chamber. "Always drawn to the flame, aren't you? Moths and bats. Not so different in that regard." Batman remained still, analyzing options. Linz hadn't stopped working on his device, suggesting he wasn't immediately threatened by Batman's presence. 3 landmark buildings destroyed. What's the endgame, Garfield? What does burning Gotham's history accomplish? Firefly made a final adjustment to his mechanism before turning, the amber lenses of his helmet catching what little light penetrated the underground chamber. "History is written by fire, Batman. The Great Rebuilding of 1871, the Renaissance after the Market Street Blaze, the New Gotham Initiative following the No Man's Land fires." He gestured expansively at the infrastructure surrounding them. "This city only truly reinvents itself after the cleansing flame has swept away the rot and decay. Targeting empty buildings is one thing," Batman replied, shifting position slightly as he spoke. "What you're planning here will endanger thousands of lives." "Evolution requires pressure," Firefly responded, his tone disturbing the academic. "Comfortable species don't adapt. Comfortable cities don't innovate." He tapped the central valve with an almost affectionate gesture. "Tomorrow night, when the old network ignites, Gotham will be forced to rise again, stronger, more resilient, reborn from its own ashes, just like the Phoenix." Batman had maneuvered to a position where he could observe the full dispersal system. The mechanism was sophisticated, timer-activated valves that would release the accelerant into multiple branches of the old gas network simultaneously, creating a chain reaction that would follow the underground pipes to their termination points throughout old Gotham. Dozens of buildings would be affected at once, overwhelming emergency services. "You were declared dead 3 years ago," Batman said, continuing to analyze the system for vulnerabilities while keeping Linz engaged. "The warehouse fire. They never found your body." Firefly's helmeted head tilted slightly, an almost contemplative gesture. "Fire changes you, purifies. What emerged from those flames wasn't Garfield Linz anymore." just as what rises from tomorrow's conflagration won't be the same Gotham. The buildings you've targeted so far, they form a pattern, Batman observed, now close enough to see the timer display on the central mechanism. Less than 24 hours remaining. A perimeter around this junction. Test burns, Firefly confirmed with professional pride, each one validating a different aspect of my formula. Dispersal rate, ignition timing, structural penetration, the scientific method applied to purifying flame. He made a dismissive gesture. I'm not some common arsonist seeking the spectacle of a blaze. I'm an artist working in the medium of transformative destruction. And the Wagner piece at the Opera House? Gotterdammerung is about the end of the world, not rebirth. For the first time, Firefly's composed demeanor showed a crack. You noticed that? Good. Few appreciate the musical component of my work. He stepped onto a narrow catwalk, moving with the confidence of someone intimately familiar with the space. The twilight of the gods represents necessary destruction before renewal, the old order consumed by flame to make way for the new. Batman was now close enough to see that Firefly carried no visible ignition source, a departure from his previous methodology. Your specialized accelerant. It has a delayed crystallization effect that creates secondary ignition points. Very good, Firefly said, genuine appreciation in his mechanically altered voice. The formula is quite revolutionary. The initial thermite reaction creates enough heat to melt conventional fire suppression systems. The crystalline matrix forms during cooling, then reactivates hours later when emergency responders believe the threat is contained. He tapped his helmet. Fire is a living thing, Batman. It evolves, adapts, learns patience. The timer display caught Batman's attention again. It wasn't counting down to the following evening as he'd initially assumed, but to something much sooner. 3 hours from now, midnight, the technical anniversary of the Market Street conflagration. Your timeline's accelerated, Batman observed, tensing for action. The system is set to activate tonight, not tomorrow. Firefly's helmet tilted in what might have been amusement. Of course it is. I wouldn't share the actual timetable with someone actively working to disrupt it. In one fluid motion, he activated his flight system, the specialized harness lifting him several feet above the catwalk. You've been illuminating to talk with, as always, but I have final preparations to complete before tonight's renaissance. Bat launched into action, a batarang striking precisely at the junction of Firefly's harness and flight pack. The projectile discharged a localized EMP, temporarily disrupting the flight system's electronics. Firefly dropped several feet before auxiliary systems engaged, stabilizing him in a hovering position above the central platform. Always so predictable, Firefly sighed, the sound distorted through his helmet. Did you think I wouldn't adapt my systems after our last encounter? From compartments in his suit, he deployed small drone-like devices that scattered throughout the chamber, positioning themselves at key structural points. Batman recognized the threat immediately. The drones were miniature versions of the dispersal mechanism, each carrying a small quantity of the crystalline accelerant. If ignited in the confined space of the junction chamber, they would create a conflagration that could potentially breach the modern gas lines connected to the old network. The countdown is a failsafe, Batman realized aloud. Even if I disable the central dispersal system, these drones will ensure the chain reaction begins. As I said, fire learns patience and contingency planning. Firefly's voice carried a note of pride. Now, shall we dance one last time before the grand performance begins? From his gauntlets, Firefly activated twin flame projectors. much more precise than his previous flamethrower apparatus. Jets of intensely hot flame cut through the darkness of the chamber, forcing Batman to dive from his position as the metal platform beneath him began to glow red with transferred heat. The underground chamber became a deadly arena, with Batman maneuvering through structural supports and ancient pipework to avoid Firefly's increasingly precise flame attacks. Each burst of fire wasn't just a weapon, but a potential trigger for the dispersal system if it hit the volatile accelerant containers. "Oracle," Batman sub-vocalized, during a momentary reprieve behind a massive valve housing. "I need a shutdown sequence for the old gas network. There must be emergency cutoffs that would isolate this junction from the rest of the system." "Working on it," she replied, the sound of rapid typing in the background. "The problem is age. Most of the original fail-safes were mechanical, not electronic. They would need to be activated manually from specific access points." Firefly's voice echoed through the chamber. "The beauty of using Gotham's forgotten infrastructure is that few remember how it actually works. These tunnels are a palimpsest of engineering, each generation adding their own solutions without fully understanding what came before." A jet of flame struck near Batman's position, heating the ancient iron to dangerous temperatures. He launched a cryocapsule toward the affected area, the rapidly expanding freeze compound temporarily counteracting the heat before it could reach critical levels. "Sir," Alfred's voice joined the communication, "I believe I've found something relevant in the historical archives. The original gas network had flood channels designed to divert water from the river in case of catastrophic pressure buildups or fires within the system." "Flood controls," Batman repeated, the tactical implications immediately clear. "Can they still be activated?" "The primary control would be at the River Junction station, approximately a quarter-mile east of your position," Alfred confirmed, "but after the modernization in the 1950s, those channels were sealed off from the main waterway for safety reasons." Batman calculated rapidly. If he could reach the river junction and reopen those flood channels, the water would neutralize both the dispersal system and the accelerant before it could ignite. But that would mean leaving Firefly uncontained at the central junction, free to adjust his plans or trigger the system manually. As if reading his thoughts, Firefly called out from his hovering position. "Trying to devise a way to flood the system, Batman? The river diversion was clever engineering for its time. That's why I sealed those channels permanently during my preparations last week." A drone zipped past Batman's position, depositing a small quantity of the crystalline accelerant on a nearby pipe junction before retreating beyond reach. Another followed, then another, each placing its volatile cargo at a structurally significant point in the chamber. The drones were creating a pattern, a familiar one. The Phoenix pattern, Batman realized. He's recreating it here, at the source. "Fire is both the medium and the message," Firefly confirmed, directing his drones with subtle hand gestures. "When this chamber ignites, the pattern will propagate through the network, emerging at key points throughout Old Gotham, a fiery phoenix rising across the city's skyline, visible from miles away. My greatest work." Batman needed to neutralize the immediate threat of the drones while developing a strategy for the larger dispersal system. The timer now showed less than 2 hours remaining, not enough time to evacuate the affected areas of Old Gotham if the system activated as designed. "The drones are networked," Oracle observed through the cowl. "They're receiving commands from Firefly's helmet system. If you can disrupt that communication..." Batman reached for a specialized EMP device, one designed for precision targeting rather than area effect. If he could disable Firefly's control system without triggering the accelerant, the drones would default to their basic programming, likely returning to their launch point for retrieval. Firefly seemed to anticipate the move. "EMP won't work this time," he called out, his voice echoing through the chamber. "The control system is magnetically shielded, another adaptation based on our previous encounters." Batman changed tactics, launching a smoke pellet toward the center of the chamber. The dense vapor wouldn't impair Firefly's visibility through his specialized helmet, but it would obscure the movements of the drones, potentially creating confusion in their coordination. As the smoke spread, Batman moved rapidly through the chamber's upper levels, targeting the structural supports that held the central dispersal mechanism in place. If he couldn't disable the device directly, perhaps he could isolate it from the main gas lines. With precise applications of explosive gel, Batman systematically weakened the structural supports connecting the central junction to the broader tunnel network. The controlled detonations wouldn't trigger the accelerant, but would create a separation between the dispersal mechanism and the gas lines leading to the rest of Gotham. Firefly recognized the strategy and responded with increasing desperation, directing his drones to intercept Batman while he himself targeted the remaining structural connections with intensifying flame attacks. The chamber became a chaos of fire, smoke, and the whirring of drone rotors as the two combatants executed their opposing strategies. "Sir," Alfred's urgent voice cut through the tactical focus. "I've been reviewing the city's emergency protocols. There's another option for containing the blast radius if the junction is compromised. The modern gas network has remote shut-off valves that could isolate the old Gotham grid. They would contain the fire to the immediate area around the junction," Batman acknowledged, dodging a particularly aggressive drone. "But the accelerant would still ignite, potentially causing a localized explosion that could breach the surface. Current coordinates place you directly beneath the Robinson Park Central Plaza," Alfred confirmed. "Relatively minimal civilian presence at this hour, and emergency services could establish a perimeter quickly. It wasn't an ideal solution, but it might be the only viable option if the dispersal system couldn't be fully neutralized." Batman made a rapid decision. "Oracle, coordinate with GCFD. Get emergency personnel to Robinson Park. Evacuate anyone in the vicinity, but maintain a low profile. We don't want to alert Firefly to the contingency plan." "On it," she confirmed. "But Batman, if that accelerant ignites in a confined space with nowhere to disperse, the back pressure would be significant," he acknowledged grimly. "I'm aware of the risk." Firefly had clearly detected the increase in communication and sensed a shift in Batman's strategy. "Whatever you're planning won't work," he called out, genuine agitation now evident in his voice. "The system is designed with multiple redundancies. Even if you isolate the junction, secondary ignition points throughout the network will still activate." Batman continued his methodical approach, ignoring Firefly's increasingly erratic flame attacks. 3 of the 4 main structural connections had been compromised. One more, and the central junction would be effectively isolated from the broader gas network. But as he placed the final charge, Batman noticed something concerning. The timer on the dispersal mechanism had accelerated dramatically. No longer counting down steadily, it now showed less than 15 minutes remaining. "He's overridden the timer," Batman reported, accelerated the sequence. "A desperate move," Alfred observed. "He's sacrificing his carefully planned timing to ensure some version of his scheme succeeds." Firefly descended rapidly to the central platform, his flight system pushing to maximum output. "If I can't have my grand design, I'll at least have this," he declared, manually adjusting controls on the dispersal mechanism. The Phoenix rises, even if only in microcosm. Batman detonated the final charge, the controlled explosion severing the last major connection between the junction chamber and the tunnel network. Simultaneously, the modern gas system's emergency protocols engaged, remote valves sealing off the grid surrounding Robinson Park. The accelerant would still ignite, but its effects would be contained to the junction chamber itself. "Get out of there now," Oracle urged. "The structural integrity is already compromised, and when that accelerant ignites—" "Not without securing Firefly," Batman replied, moving toward the central platform where Linz continued his manic adjustments to the dispersal mechanism. The timer now showed less than 5 minutes, barely enough time to neutralize the immediate threat and evacuate the chamber before detonation. Batman launched his grappling line toward a support beam above the central platform, swinging in a wide arc that brought him directly into Firefly's workspace. "It's over, Linz," Batman stated as he landed with practiced precision on the edge of the platform. "The network is isolated. The most you'll accomplish now is destroying this chamber." Firefly's helmet turned toward him, the amber lenses reflecting the dim emergency lights. "You still don't understand, do you? Fire isn't just destruction, it's transformation." His hands continued moving across the control panel. "Even contained, this blaze will be my masterpiece, the heart of the Phoenix." Batman moved forward to apprehend him, but Firefly triggered his flight system, rising several feet above the platform. The dispersal mechanism was now counting down from 3 minutes, its acceleration seemingly irreversible. "Sir," Alfred's voice came with urgency, "the thermal readings from that device are spiking dramatically. I believe Mr. Linz has modified the accelerant mixture to create an even more volatile reaction." Batman assessed the situation rapidly. Neutralizing the dispersal mechanism directly might trigger an immediate detonation. Pursuing Firefly would leave the device unattended during its final countdown. The chamber's structural integrity had already been compromised by their battle and the controlled explosions. "There is another way," Batman realized, his gaze falling on the ancient valve systems surrounding the central platform. The original engineers built these chambers to withstand industrial accidents. There must be emergency containment protocols besides the flood channels. "Indeed," Alfred confirmed, typing rapidly in the background. "According to the original schematics, the chamber has pressure release vents designed to channel explosive force upward, away from the tunnel network. Can they still function after 150 years? Oracle asked. "Only one way to find out," Batman replied, already moving toward the manual controls for the chamber's original safety systems. Firefly, recognizing the threat to his plan, directed his remaining drones to intercept Batman. "No," he shouted, his voice echoing through the chamber. "The Phoenix must rise, the symbol must be seen." Batman deflected the first drone with a precision batarang, dodging the second as he reached the ancient valve wheel that would activate the pressure release system. The mechanism had clearly not been maintained for decades, its components fused with corrosion and age. "The release system is seized," he reported, applying his full strength to the valve wheel. "Manual override isn't responding." "The auxiliary hydraulic system," Alfred suggested. "There should be a secondary activation panel designed for emergency use." Batman located the panel. An unassuming metal box recessed into the brick wall near the main valve controls. Inside was a simple mechanical lever, protected from accidental activation by a heavy metal housing. The timer now showed just over 1 minute remaining. Firefly had descended again to make final adjustments to the dispersal mechanism, his obsession with perfecting his masterpiece overriding even his self-preservation instincts. "I'm activating the pressure release system," Batman announced, pulling the emergency lever with significant force. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a deep groaning sound that resonated through the chamber's ancient bones, massive metal panels in the ceiling began to shift. "No!" Firefly shouted, abandoning his work on the dispersal mechanism to launch himself toward Batman. "You're ruining everything!" Batman evaded Firefly's desperate attack, using the pyromaniac's momentum against him. "The fire will still ignite," he stated calmly, "but it will follow the path of least resistance, up through the release vents, not outward through the gas network." Firefly's response was a howl of rage as he unleashed his remaining flame projector at full capacity. The jet of intense heat missed Batman, but struck a section of ancient pipework, causing the metal to glow red and begin to deform. Secondary fires ignited around the chamber as embers and superheated fragments scattered from the primary flame. 30 seconds, Oracle warned. "Batman, you need to evacuate now." The pressure release vents had fully opened, creating a vertical chimney from the junction chamber to a sealed access point beneath Robinson Park. The vents hadn't been maintained, but their basic function remained intact. They would channel the force of the explosion upward rather than outward. Batman turned to Firefly, who was now frantically trying to override the pressure vent system. "There's still time to get out, Linz. The accelerant is going to ignite whether you're here or not." For a moment, it seemed Firefly might actually heed the warning. His helmeted head turned from the dispersal mechanism to the exit tunnel, calculation evident even through the expressionless faceplate. Then his attention fixed on something beyond Batman's shoulder. A small drone, the last of his aerial devices, hovering near one of the pressure vents with its payload of crystalline accelerant still intact. "The Phoenix always rises," Firefly whispered, just loudly enough for Batman to hear. "From death comes rebirth." He triggered his flight system once more, shooting upward toward the open pressure vent, his remaining drone following in his wake. Batman launched his grappling line, the hook catching Firefly's ankle just as the timer reached 15 seconds. The sudden restraint caused Linz to spin in midair, his flight path disrupted. "Let me go," Firefly demanded, trying to burn through the grappling line with his remaining flame projector. "My work must be completed." "Your work ends here," Batman replied, using the line to pull Firefly away from the pressure vent and back toward the platform. 10 seconds remained on the dispersal mechanism's timer. With a desperate twist, Firefly managed to direct his drone toward the accelerant containers on the central platform. "If I can't have my Phoenix," he declared, "I'll have an inferno." Batman had seconds to make a decision. The drone was on a collision course with the main accelerant supply. If it struck, the resulting explosion would be catastrophic, potentially breaching even the isolated chamber. Maintaining his hold on Firefly would prevent him from intercepting the drone in time. 5 seconds, Oracle warned. Batman released the grappling line, immediately launching himself toward the approaching drone. A precisely thrown batarang struck the small aerial device just meters from its target, sending it spiraling off course. The drone crashed into the chamber wall, its small payload igniting in a brief but intense flash of heat and light. 2 seconds. Batman turned toward Firefly, who hovered near the pressure vent, seeming torn between escape and witnessing his creation's final moments. "Linz, there's no time." For just an instant, their eyes met across the chamber. Batman's determined and urgent, Firefly's visible only as reflections in his amber lenses. Then, the timer reached 0. The dispersal mechanism activated with an almost anticlimactic series of mechanical clicks. Clear fluid began to flow from its containers into the isolated junction pipes. For a brief moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the first crystals began to form where the fluid contacted the air, their structure catching and refracting the emergency lights in prismatic. Fascinating, Alfred observed through the cowl. The crystallization appears to create an exothermic reaction that builds toward ignition temperature. Batman was already moving, firing his grappling line toward the pressure vent. Evacuating now, Firefly is still in the chamber. The crystals multiplied rapidly across the central platform, their formation accompanied by an increasing temperature that Batman could feel even at a distance. The air began to shimmer with heat distortion as the crystalline structures raced along every surface they touched, transforming the junction chamber into something that resembled a geode, growing in accelerated time. Batman reached the pressure vent just as the first crystals began to glow with an inner light. Looking back, he saw Firefly remaining in position, arms outstretched, as if embracing the approaching conflagration. "Garfield," Batman called out one last time. Firefly turned slowly, the amber lenses of his helmet reflecting the growing crystalline glow. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said, his voice filled with a pyromaniac's ecstasy. The moment of transformation. The crystals reached critical temperature, a wave of white-hot ignition sweeping across the chamber. Batman pulled himself up through the pressure vent as the conflagration erupted below, the specially designed chimney channeled the explosive force upward. Even with the safety system functioning, the heat and pressure were intense, threatening to overwhelm him as he ascended. "Batman!" Oracle's voice crackled through interference caused by the explosion. "What's your status?" He didn't waste breath on a response, focusing every ounce of strength on continuing his upward climb through the vertical passage. The metal walls of the pressure vent glowed red with transferred heat, the air becoming almost impossible to breathe as the firestorm raged below. Finally, he reached the sealed access point beneath Robinson Park. The cover plate had already begun to buckle from the pressure building beneath it. Batman applied his explosive gel to the weakened sections, detonating it just as the pressure wave from below reached its peak. The explosion blasted the cover open, and Batman emerged into the cool night air of Robinson Park, rolling clear as a column of flame shot skyward from the opened vent. The firestorm had followed the path of least resistance exactly as predicted, channeling its fury into a vertical spire of fire that illuminated the park and surrounding buildings with an unearthly light. From a safe distance, Batman watched as the emergency protocols he'd helped implement unfolded. GCFD teams had established a perimeter, their equipment ready but intervention unnecessary as the isolated blaze burned itself out within the containment system. The column of flame gradually diminished, changing from white-hot intensity to a more ordinary red-orange, then to flickering yellow before finally subsiding altogether. "Fire contained," Oracle confirmed through his cowl. GCFD reports no spread to surrounding structures. The dispersal system was successfully isolated. "And Firefly?" Alfred inquired. Batman gazed at the scorched access point, smoke still rising from the vent system. No sign of him. The temperature in the junction chamber would have exceeded even his suit's tolerances. "They didn't find a body last time either," Oracle reminded him. "I know." Batman's tone acknowledged the possibility, however remote, that Garfield Lynns might somehow have survived. "Have GCFD teams maintain the perimeter and inspect the chamber once it's cool enough to access safely." The night sky above Robinson Park still held a faint glow. Not from actual flames, but from the light pollution of the city reflecting off the lingering smoke. To someone watching from a distance, it might almost resemble the outline of a bird with wings outstretched, rising above the city skyline. Dawn found Bruce Wayne in the Batcave, reviewing the night's events while Alfred prepared a much-needed cup of tea. Multiple screens displayed analysis of the crystalline accelerant, structural assessments of the affected tunnel network, and preliminary reports from GCFD's inspection of the junction chamber. No trace of human remains, Bruce noted, studying the fire marshal's initial findings. The heat was intense enough to destroy nearly everything in the chamber, but they should have found something from his suit, components that would resist even those temperatures. Perhaps Mr. Linz found another exit route not documented in the historical plans, Alfred suggested, placing the tea beside Bruce's workstation. Or perhaps he truly did become one with his element, as it were. Bruce's expression remained troubled. His obsession with the phoenix symbolism, death and rebirth through fire. It's possible this was all elaborate suicide, his final transformation, or merely another disappearing act, Alfred countered. I recall you mentioned his theatrical background. The man certainly had a flair for dramatic exits. Before Bruce could respond, one of the screens flashed with an incoming communication from Oracle. You're going to want to see this, Barbara said as her image appeared. Catherine Vale just published her expose on the fires. It went live 10 minutes ago on the Gazette's website. The article appeared on the main screen. Ashes of the Phoenix, How Batman Prevented a Firestorm in Old Gotham. The byline credited Catherine Vale with a timestamp from early that morning. Somehow she had pieced together much of what had transpired beneath Robinson Park, including details about the old gas network and Firefly's planned chain reaction. How did she get this information? Bruce wondered, scanning the article. She couldn't have known about the junction chamber or the dispersal system. Unless she followed you there, Barbara suggested. She was at the Opera House investigation, remember? And she'd already connected the dots between the targeted buildings. Alfred leaned closer to read a particular passage. Interesting. She specifically mentions that the GCFD found no evidence of human remains, but quotes an anonymous source saying, "Fire doesn't necessarily destroy. Sometimes it transforms." Bruce's expression darkened. That sounds like something Linz would say. She may have interviewed him before last night. Or after, Barbara suggested quietly. The implication hung in the air for a moment before Bruce dismissed it with a slight shake of his head. Speculation without evidence. If Firefly survived, he'll resurface eventually. But perhaps with a new methodology, Alfred observed. Even arsonists can learn from failure, one would hope. Bruce turned his attention to another screen, where a molecular analysis of the crystalline accelerant was running. The formula is unlike anything we've encountered before. Military-grade components, but reconfigured in a way that suggests deep understanding of chemical engineering and fire dynamics. Garfield Linz was always more than just a pyromaniac, Barbara reminded them. His background in theatrical pyrotechnics gave him expertise that most arsonists lack, and an artist's appreciation for symbolism and presentation, Alfred added. The Phoenix imagery wasn't random. It reflected his personal philosophy about destruction and rebirth. Bruce stood, stretching muscles that still carried the tension of the night's confrontation. Have the GCFD seal all access points to the old gas network. If any of Firefly's modifications remain intact, we need to ensure they can't be activated remotely or by a timer we haven't discovered yet. Already coordinating with Commissioner Gordon on that front, Barbara confirmed. They're bringing in specialists to inspect the entire historical infrastructure. As Bruce prepared to finally seek some rest, Alfred gestured to one final detail on the fire marshal's report. There is one curious note here, sir. Among the debris in the junction chamber, they found intact specimens of the crystalline residue. similar to what you collected at the previous fire sites, but in a more refined form. Bruce examined the images with renewed interest. The structure is different, more organized, almost architectural in its formation. Indeed, Alfred agreed. And if you look at the crystal growth pattern from above, the shape was subtle but unmistakable once identified. The outline of a bird with wings outstretched, rising from stylized flames. A phoenix, encoded in the very molecular structure of Firefly's creation. Even in apparent defeat, he managed to leave his signature, Bruce observed quietly. A sobering reminder, Alfred commented, that the most dangerous fires are often those that appear to be extinguished, only to smolder unseen until conditions are right for their return. The words lingered in Bruce's mind as he finally sought the rest his body demanded. Outside Wayne Manor, the sun continued its ascent over Gotham, its light catching on the distant windows of the city's towers. From certain angles, those reflections might resemble flames, not of destruction, but of illumination, revealing the ever-changing face of the city Batman had sworn to protect from threats both seen and unseen, both fiery and shadowed. In the days that followed, reconstruction crews worked to shore up the affected section of Robinson Park. The explosion had left a modest crater where the pressure vent had erupted, but compared to Firefly's intended devastation, the damage was minimal. Already, city planners were discussing how to incorporate the site into a memorial garden, not just for this averted disaster, but for all the historic fires that had shaped Gotham's evolution over the century. Catherine Vale's article had sparked renewed interest in the city's architectural heritage, with the Burnley Preservation Society receiving an anonymous donation to continue their work advocating for modern fire safety systems in historic buildings. The donors' only stipulation was that the funds be used to protect rather than transform, to preserve Gotham's unique character while making it more resilient. Bruce Wayne, observing these developments from both his penthouse office and his underground headquarters, found a certain symmetry in the outcome. Firefly had sought to force Gotham's rebirth through destructive flame, but instead had inadvertently catalyzed a more measured, thoughtful renewal, one that honored the past while securing the future. As night fell once more over the city, Batman began his patrol with heightened awareness of the ever-present tension between destruction and creation, between endings and beginnings. Like the mythical phoenix that had become Firefly's obsession, Gotham had risen from its own ashes countless times throughout its history. Not through cataclysmic conflagration, but through the determined efforts of those who believed in preservation as well as progress. The buildings he passed on his nightly rounds contained that history within their walls. Stories of collapse and rebuilding, of devastation and renewal. Each brick and beam, each cornerstone and spire represented not just architecture, but resilience. Gotham endured, despite the flames that periodically threatened to consume it, because enough people believed in fighting those fires rather than surrendering to their destructive allure. Batman's cape caught the wind as he leapt between rooftops, his silhouette momentarily resembling great wings spread against the night sky. Not the wings of a phoenix rising from fire, but of a bat embracing the protective darkness. A guardian who understood that some things must be preserved rather than purified, protected rather than transformed. In the eternal dance between fire and shadow, between destruction and protection, he had made his choice, and Gotham, in all its scarred and beautiful complexity, was safer for it. As the final embers of the Robinson Park incident cooled, Batman's vigil over Gotham continued uninterrupted. The city had narrowly escaped Firefly's vision of purifying flame, But the Dark Knight knew that danger in Gotham never truly disappeared. It merely changed form, emerging from different shadows with new faces and fresh terrors. In the weeks that followed, Bruce found himself drawn to rumors of a different kind of threat emerging in Gotham's elite circles. Not the spectacular, fiery destruction that Garfield Lynns had envisioned, but something more insidious. Whispers that slipped through the city's quietest corridors, secrets long buried being systematically unearthed and weaponized against their keepers. "Master Bruce," Alfred remarked one evening as he set down a cup of tea in the Batcave, "have you been following the curious case of Judge Harwood's sudden resignation?" Bruce glanced up from the chemical analysis he'd been reviewing. "The ethics investigation. It seemed straightforward enough. Financial improprieties coming to light." "Perhaps," Alfred replied, his tone suggesting otherwise. "But it's the third such revelation about a prominent Gotham figure in as many weeks. First, Dr. Meridian steps down from Gotham General, citing personal reasons. Then Councilman Fraser withdraws from the upcoming election after those photographs surfaced. And now Judge Harwood." Bruce leaned back in his chair, considering. "You think they're connected?" "I think," Alfred said carefully, "that these individuals share very little in common except for one curious detail. All three attended Gotham Preparatory Academy during the same 4-year period, as did you, sir." A familiar tension settled between Bruce's shoulders as he processed the implication. Someone was targeting his former classmates, methodically exposing secrets that had remained hidden for decades. Not with fire that announced itself with spectacle and heat, but with surgical precision that left no traces. No evidence of the hand that had turned these lives to ash. "There's something else," Alfred continued, placing a pristine white card on the desk beside Bruce's tea. "This arrived at the manor today. Hand-delivered, according to the security logs, though none of the cameras captured the messenger. The card bore no text, only an elegantly embossed design, the silhouette of a bandaged face, rendered in raised white ink that was nearly invisible against the cardstock's matching background. Bruce didn't need to touch it to know the quality was exceptional, the craftsmanship meticulous. "It seems, sir," Alfred said quietly, "that an old acquaintance wishes to resume your conversation." As Bruce studied the card, his mind already cataloguing the implications, the shadows of the Batcave seemed to deepen around him. From Firefly's blazing chaos to this cold, calculating precision, Gotham's pendulum of threat swinging once again, from the Inferno to the Whisper, from the Phoenix's spectacular rebirth to the Hollow Man's vengeful lament. Batman would be ready. He always was. The rain fell in gentle cascades across Gotham's skyline, each drop catching the amber glow of streetlights before disappearing into darkness. From his position atop Wayne Tower, Batman watched the city breathe beneath him, its inhabitants moving through the night like blood cells through veins, unaware of the disease slowly spreading among them. He had been tracking a pattern for weeks now, something elusive that prickled at the edges of his consciousness, but refused to take definitive shape. "Sir, there's been another one." Alfred's voice came through his cowl, measured and calm as always, though Bruce could detect the subtle tension underneath. "Where?" Batman asked, already moving toward the edge of the rooftop. "Bristol Heights. The victim was discovered by her housekeeper approximately 40 minutes ago. The police scanner indicates Detective Montoya is handling the scene personally." Batman fired his grappling hook toward an adjacent building. "Send me the exact address." "Already done, sir, and Master Bruce." Alfred paused, choosing his words carefully. "This victim shares the same surgical anomalies as the others. The Batmobile's tires whispered across rain-slick streets as Batman made his way to Bristol Heights, the wealthiest enclave of Gotham's already affluent northern districts. The neighborhood was a collection of stately homes set back from tree-lined roads, their manicured lawns and security gates creating the illusion of safety that wealth often promised but seldom delivered in Gotham. Police lights painted the night in alternating blue and red as he approached. Batman parked the Batmobile several blocks away, preferring to approach on foot. The victim's home, a sprawling Tudor revival mansion, was cordoned off with yellow tape, officers stationed at regular intervals around the perimeter. He found Detective Renee Montoya on the back terrace, her expression grim as she supervised the forensics team. She noticed his approach without surprise, merely nodding in acknowledgement. "I wondered how long before you showed up," she said quietly. "This makes 4 now." "4 that we know of," Batman replied. "Tell me what happened." Montoya led him inside, talking in low tones. "Victim is Helena Ravencroft, age 42, chairwoman of Ravencroft Pharmaceuticals and member of Gotham General Hospital's board of directors. Housekeeper found her this morning when she didn't come down for breakfast. They entered a spacious bedroom where the forensics team was carefully documenting the scene. The victim lay on her bed, positioned with an unnatural precision, hands folded over her abdomen, head centered on the pillow. But it was her face that demanded attention, or rather, what remained of it. "Same as the others," Montoya confirmed. "Face surgically removed with extraordinary precision. ME says the killer has medical training, possibly surgical specialization." Batman moved closer, examining the victim without touching her. The facial removal had been performed with meticulous care, leaving remarkably clean edges. This wasn't rushed work. The killer had taken their time, treating their grisly task as art. "Time of death," he asked. "Between midnight and 3 a.m., Montoya replied. "Security system was disabled at 11:42 p.m., reactivated at 2:17 a.m. No signs of forced entry. Either the killer had the codes, or the victim let them in willingly." Batman's enhanced vision scanned the room, noting details invisible to others. Microscopic blood droplets in a pattern indicating the victim had been sedated first, not killed outright. Faint impression marks on the carpet suggesting medical equipment had been temporarily placed there. The killer had brought tools, created a sterile field, performed their macabre operation, and cleaned up after themselves. This was not impulsive violence. It was calculated, clinical. "Any connection between the victims?" he asked, though he had already been building his own web of relationships. Montoya handed him a tablet. "All prominent Gotham citizens: Gerald Whitman, banking; Diana Mills, real estate development; Marcus Sullivan, technology. Now Helena Ravencroft, pharmaceuticals. Different industries, but they all move in the same social circles. And they've all disappeared from those circles recently," Batman added, "only to reappear changed in subtle ways." Montoya's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" "The victims' public appearances didn't stop after their deaths," Batman explained. "Someone has been impersonating them, wearing prosthetics crafted from their own faces." The detective's expression shifted from confusion to horror as understanding dawned. "You're saying someone is killing these people, taking their faces, and then becoming them? How is that even possible?" "With enough surgical skill and the right resources, very possible," Batman replied. "I need access to the autopsy reports for all 4 victims." "I'll have them sent to Gordon's office," Montoya agreed. "But what's the end game here? Why replace Gotham's elites?" Batman moved toward the window, gazing out at the city lights diffused by continuing rain. Control, influence, power. Someone is methodically positioning themselves at the center of Gotham's infrastructure, one face at a time. As he prepared to leave, Montoya called after him, "There's something else. Each victim had a playing card left in their hand. Ace of diamonds, king of clubs, queen of hearts. Ravencroft had the jack of spades." Batman paused. "They're building a royal flush, and they're still missing their final card." The Batcave's ambient sounds, water dripping from stalactites, the distant chittering of bats, the gentle hum of computers, created a soothing backdrop as Alfred and Bruce examined autopsy reports spread across multiple screens. "The incisions are identical on all 4 victims," Alfred noted, highlighting areas on the digital images. "Extraordinary precision. The surgical technique is consistent with reconstructive procedures used for severe facial trauma." Bruce leaned closer to the screen. "There's something familiar about the technique. It reminds me of Dr. Thomas Eliot," Alfred finished for him. "Yes, I had the same thought, sir." The name hung in the air between them, heavy with shared history and betrayal. Thomas Eliot, brilliant surgeon, childhood friend, and the man who would become the villain known as Hush, a master of disguise and psychological manipulation who knew Bruce Wayne perhaps better than anyone outside the cave. "We haven't seen him in over a year," Bruce said, pulling up the last known intelligence on Eliot. "Not since he tried to steal my identity. A pursuit he seems to have expanded," Alfred observed dryly, "though why these particular individuals?" Bruce brought up profiles of all 4 victims, arranging them alongside Gotham's organizational charts. Banking, real estate, technology, pharmaceuticals, key sectors of Gotham's economy. With puppets in these positions, someone could orchestrate a massive financial collapse. Or, he trailed off, seeing a new pattern emerge. "Or what, sir?" "Or they could approve and fund an unprecedented construction project," Bruce said, connecting lines between the victims on his display. "Whitman's bank holds the city's municipal bonds. Mills Company owns half the undeveloped land in the East End. Sullivan's technology would be necessary for security systems, and Ravencroft Pharmaceuticals has patents on several compounds used in advanced building materials." Alfred studied the connections. What sort of construction project would require such elaborate preparation? "I don't know yet," Bruce admitted, "but there's another common thread." He highlighted a calendar entry appearing on all the victims' schedules. They were all planning to attend the Gotham Renewal Foundation Gala tomorrow night. "As are you, sir," Alfred reminded him. "It's been on your calendar for months." Bruce's expression darkened. The perfect opportunity to unveil whatever they've been planning, with all of Gotham's influences in one room. "And perhaps to complete their royal flush," Alfred added grimly. "If I may, sir, who would be the logical ace?" The question settled between them with leaden weight. They both knew the answer. "Bruce Wayne," Batman said, looking at his own face reflected in the computer screen. "Controlling Wayne Enterprises would give them access to everything they need." "Then we must assume you are the next target," Alfred said, his composed voice betraying only the slightest tremor of concern. "Perhaps it would be prudent to miss this particular social engagement." Bruce shook his head. "If I don't appear, they'll simply wait for another opportunity. Better to confront this on our terms." He turned to Alfred. "We need to identify who's been impersonating the victims. They'll all be at the gala. How does one detect an imposter wearing someone else's face, sir?" "By looking beneath the surface," Bruce replied, already formulating a plan. "I'll need Lucius to modify some equipment." The next morning found Bruce in Lucius Fox's private lab at Wayne Enterprises, explaining what he needed while carefully omitting certain details. Miniaturized thermal imaging that can detect subtle variations in facial temperature patterns, Lucius repeated, raising an eyebrow. Sounds like you're trying to spot high-end prosthetics, Mr. Wayne. Bruce gave him a measured smile. Just a precaution. There've been some concerning security breaches at recent social events. Lucius responded, clearly unconvinced, but professional enough not to press. And I suppose these prosthetics would need to fool retinal scanners and voice recognition systems as well. Potentially. Lucius began sketching designs on his tablet. Then you'll need more than thermal imaging. Modern prosthetics can regulate surface temperature. You'll want subsurface scanning capabilities, something that can detect the boundary between real skin and synthetic material. He looked up. This have anything to do with those society murders? Bruce maintained his casual demeanor. What makes you ask that? Because Helena Ravencroft's financial team contacted me this morning about a joint venture between Wayne Medical and Ravencroft Pharmaceuticals, Lucius said. A project she and I explicitly rejected 3 weeks ago. Whoever I spoke with wasn't aware of that decision. Could it have been a miscommunication? No, Lucius said firmly. We discussed it extensively. Either she had complete memory loss, or it wasn't her, Bruce finished. Lucius studied him carefully. Be cautious, Mr. Wayne. There are some very strange things happening in Gotham's boardrooms lately. Decisions being reversed, projects being approved with unusual speed, something systematic. Have you noticed any unusual financial patterns? Lucius pulled up several spreadsheets. As a matter of fact, yes. Large transfers moving through shell companies registered in the Caymans, all ultimately funding something called Project Renaissance. No details attached, just a budget that would make even you blink. Bruce memorized the account numbers. I need that scanning technology by tonight, Lucius. For the renewal gala? At Bruce's nod, Lucius's expression grew concerned. You think whoever's behind this will be there? I think they're already here, Bruce replied. They've just been wearing other people's faces. Back at the manor, Bruce found Alfred in the cave, studying medical records with intense concentration. I believe I've identified a potential witness, sir, Alfred said without preamble. Martin Chambers, admitted to Gotham General 3 weeks ago with severe facial lacerations. According to these records, he was found in an alley behind Sullivan Technologies, where the third victim worked. Bruce reviewed the file. The injuries are consistent with a partially completed facial removal. Indeed, sir, it appears our perpetrator was interrupted before they could finish their work. Mr. Chambers has been in a medically induced coma due to trauma, but his doctors began waking him yesterday. I need to speak with him, Bruce said. He might be the only person who's seen the killer's face. Gotham General's intensive care unit was quiet in the late afternoon, the staff changing shifts as Batman slipped through a service entrance. He'd studied the hospital's layout extensively, knowing which corridors would be empty, which security cameras to avoid. The Martin Chambers room was monitored by a single officer, standard procedure for victims of violent crime. Batman waited until the officer stepped away for coffee before entering through the window. Chambers lay still, connected to various monitoring equipment, his face heavily bandaged, but his eyes were open, staring at the ceiling with the unfocused gaze of someone still emerging from deep sedation. Martin, Batman said quietly, moving into his field of vision, I need to ask you about what happened. The man's eyes widened in recognition, then fear. He tried to speak, but his throat was too dry from intubation. Batman offered him a small sip of water. Took my face, Chambers finally whispered, reaching trembling fingers toward his bandages. Tried to. Who did it? Doctor, Chambers managed. Called himself Dorian. Batman leaned closer. What did he look like? Bandages, Chambers said, his breathing becoming labored. Face covered in bandages, but his eyes... I know those eyes. From where? Television. Newspaper. Chambers struggled to find the words. Famous doctor. The one who separated twins. Conjoined. Batman's suspicions solidified into certainty. Thomas Elliot had been renowned for separating conjoined twins before his fall from grace. Before he became Hush. What is Project Renaissance? Batman asked. Chambers' eyes widened. How did you... What is it, Martin? What is Elliot planning? Underground, Chambers whispered. Building something. Underground. Uses the faces to... approve permits. Access restricted areas. His heart monitor began beeping faster. He said, perfect society, his design, beneath the city. A nurse's voice came from the hallway, responding to the elevated heart rate alarm. Batman needed to leave, but he had one final question. Where, Martin? Where is he building it? Old subway tunnels, Chambers gasped. Beneath the East End, he called it New Gotham. As the nurse entered, Batman vanished through the window, Chambers' words echoing in his mind. New Gotham, a hidden city beneath the existing one, designed and controlled by a man whose brilliance was matched only by his megalomania. Evening transformed Gotham, the city's jagged skyline softening under twilight's gentle touch. The Renewal Foundation Gala was being held in the restored Grand Concourse of Gotham Central Station, its Beaux-Arts architecture providing a dramatic backdrop for the city's elite to display their commitment to urban revival. Ironic, Bruce thought, considering what he now suspected was happening beneath their feet. He arrived deliberately late, allowing the thermal imaging contact lenses Lucius had provided time to calibrate as he scanned the crowd. The tiny devices transmitted data to Alfred at the cave, who monitored for anomalies that might indicate prosthetic faces. I'm seeing at least 3 potential matches, sir. Alfred's voice came through the nearly invisible earpiece. Mr. Sullivan by the east entrance, Miss Mills near the bar, and Ms. Ravencroft speaking with the mayor. Bruce moved casually through the crowd, stopping to exchange pleasantries while studying each suspect. On the surface, they appeared completely normal, the same people he'd known through countless boardrooms and charity events, but the scanner revealed subtle inconsistencies. Tiny temperature differentials where prosthetic edges met real skin, microscopic seams hidden by makeup. They're good, Alfred, he murmured when no one was close enough to hear. If I hadn't been looking specifically for the signs, I'd never have noticed. One has to admire the craftsmanship, sir, however macabre the purpose. Bruce approached Sullivan first, engaging him in conversation about a technological partnership Bruce had proposed months earlier. A proposal the real Sullivan had flatly rejected. I've reconsidered your offer, Bruce, the imposter said smoothly. Your integration concepts have merit. We should move forward immediately. Glad to hear it, Bruce replied with a practiced smile. I'll have legal draw up the paperwork. He casually touched Sullivan's wrist as they shook hands, a specialized sensor in his cufflink reading pulse and blood chemistry. Though I was under the impression you had concerns about patent overlap. Minor issues, the false Sullivan assured him, easily resolved. As Bruce moved away, Alfred confirmed what he already suspected. Elevated cortisol levels and micro-expressions consistent with deception, sir. Definitely not the real Marcus Sullivan. Bruce moved methodically through the party, confirming that all three of his initial suspects were indeed imposters. Each interaction revealed the same pattern. They agreed too readily with his proposals, lacking the genuine knowledge of past interactions that the real people would possess. "Has the final card appeared yet, sir?" Alfred asked as Bruce paused near a refreshment table. "Not yet, but..." Bruce stopped mid-sentence as a familiar figure entered the gala. A man he knew all too well, wearing an impeccably tailored suit and a face wrapped in surgical bandages. "He's here, Alfred. Elliot just walked in." Thomas Elliot moved through the crowd with confident ease, the bandages covering his face, drawing curious glances but little genuine concern in a city as peculiar as Gotham. His cover story, a recent cosmetic procedure requiring protection, was accepted without question by the socialites around him. "Sir, I strongly advise caution," Alfred warned. "Dr. Elliot would not expose himself so openly without significant preparation." "Agreed," Bruce murmured. "He wants me to see him. He's setting a stage." As if hearing his thoughts, Elliot turned and looked directly at Bruce across the room. Even with most of his face concealed, his eyes conveyed a clear message. The game had begun. Bruce made his way toward Elliot, but the crowd seemed to shift deliberately between them. Each time Bruce changed course, the room's flow adjusted, keeping them apart. Not coincidence, Bruce realized, but choreography. The imposters were working in concert, subtly maneuvering the attendee. "Mr. Wayne," a voice called, and Bruce turned to find Commissioner Gordon at his elbow. "Didn't expect to see you here tonight." "Jim," Bruce acknowledged with genuine warmth, "keeping an eye on Gotham's elite." Gordon lowered his voice. 4 of Gotham's most prominent citizens murdered, and suddenly people claiming to be them are making major decisions affecting the city. Thought I should see for myself. Noticed anything unusual? Besides the fact that Helena Ravencroft just approved a pharmaceutical protocol she spent 2 years fighting against. Gordon took a sip of his drink. The mayors signed off on a massive subterranean construction project without council approval, called it essential infrastructure, bypassed all the normal channels. Bruce's gaze drifted back to where he'd last seen Elliot, but the bandaged figure had vanished. What kind of infrastructure? That's the thing. The plans are classified. Something about research facilities beneath the East End, connected to the old subway system. Gordon's expression tightened. Sound familiar? Eerily so, Bruce agreed. Almost like someone's building their own private version of Gotham underground. Exactly what I was thinking. Gordon set down his glass. Strange times when I'm having conversations like this at fancy parties instead of rooftops. A sudden commotion near the central staircase drew their attention. Thomas Elliot stood on the landing, tapping a knife against a crystal glass to call for silence. The crowd gradually quieted, turning toward the bandaged figure with curious expressions. "Ladies and gentlemen of Gotham," Elliot announced, his voice carrying effortlessly through the space. "I want to thank you all for your unwitting participation in tonight's entertainment." Confused murmurs rippled through the gathering. "Perhaps I should introduce myself properly," Elliot continued, beginning to unwrap the bandages covering his face. "Some of you knew me as Dr. Thomas Elliot, others by a name whispered in Gotham's shadows." As the last bandage fell away, collective gasps rose from the crowd. The face revealed was not Elliot's, but Bruce Wayne's, a perfect replica, down to the smallest detail. "Tonight marks the beginning of a new chapter for Gotham," the false Bruce announced. "A renaissance built on the understanding that identity is fluid, that with the right face, anyone can become someone else." His gaze found the real Bruce in the crowd. "Even you." Bruce felt Gordon tense beside him, hand moving subtly toward his concealed weapon. "What the hell is this, Wayne?" the commissioner muttered. "Not what it appears," Bruce replied quietly, already calculating his options. The exits were likely covered by Elliot's people, and creating a panic would only endanger civilians. He needed to isolate Elliot. The imposter continued his speech, outlining a vision of necessary change for Gotham, a city redesigned according to his specifications, beginning with the underground complex being constructed beneath them. As he spoke, Bruce noticed the other imposters moving into predetermined positions around the room, creating a perimeter. "Sir," Alfred's urgent voice came through his earpiece. "I'm detecting movement in the service corridors, armed individuals taking up positions." Bruce had suspected something like this. Elliot wouldn't arrange such an elaborate reveal without ensuring he controlled the situation. "How many?" "At least 12, sir, and they appear to be wearing GCPD tactical gear." Gordon's radio crackled. After listening briefly, his expression darkened. "Someone just called in a terrorist threat at the gala. SWAT's mobilizing." "Not SWAT," Bruce said grimly. "Elliot's people, using police identification." From his position on the landing, the false Bruce spread his arms in a gesture of magnanimous welcome. "For those of you who embrace the future I'm offering, there will be a place in New Gotham. For those who resist," he smiled, an expression Bruce recognized as an imitation of his own public persona, yet twisted by something cold underneath. "Well..." The first of Elliot's disguised operatives entered through the main doors, tactical gear and weapons creating immediate panic among the attendees. Bruce used the chaos to disappear, slipping through a service door toward a maintenance area, where he had secreted a scaled-down version of his equipment earlier in the day. As screams and confusion erupted behind him, Bruce moved with practiced efficiency, retrieving the reinforced case hidden behind a ventilation panel. Within minutes, he had shed Bruce Wayne's formal attire and emerged as Batman. A transition he had performed countless times, yet one that felt particularly significant tonight. Somewhere in the building, someone was wearing his face, claiming his identity. The lines between Bruce Wayne and Batman, always carefully maintained, had never felt so crucial. Batman moved through maintenance corridors, reaching a position overlooking the main hall. Elliot's team had efficiently corralled the guests into the center of the room, while the false Bruce continued addressing them with cold authority. "Consider this a changing of the guard," Elliot was saying. "Gotham's elite have failed this city for generations. My new Gotham will be built on more precise principles, surgical in its approach to the disease that infects these streets." Batman counted 14 operatives, all carrying military-grade weapons and moving with professional discipline. Not common thugs, but trained mercenaries. Taking them head-on would endanger too many civilians. "Alfred," he sub-vocalized, "I need a distraction. Can you trigger the emergency systems remotely?" "Working on it, sir. Their security override has locked me out of most functions, but the older mechanical systems might still respond." Batman spotted Gordon across the room, surreptitiously coordinating with plainclothes officers scattered among the guests. The commissioner caught his eye briefly, giving an almost imperceptible nod. They needed to coordinate their response. "Sir, I've accessed the original pneumatic delivery system," Alfred reported. "It runs beneath the main floor. The noise should provide approximately 7 seconds of distraction." "On my mark," Batman instructed, positioning himself above a cluster of Elliot's operatives. 3, 2, 1, now. A tremendous rumbling erupted beneath the floor as the century-old pneumatic tubes, once used to transport mail throughout the station, suddenly pressurized. The unexpected noise startled both captors and captives, creating the moment of confusion Batman needed. He descended from the rafters in a controlled drop, taking down 2 operatives before they could react. Across the room, Gordon and his officers moved simultaneously, disarming 3 more. The guests scattered toward exits, reducing the risk of collateral casualties. Elliot, still wearing Bruce Wayne's face, backed away from the chaos, flanked by 2 guards. His expression showed neither surprise nor concern, but rather satisfied expectation. "Right on cue," the imposter said, just loudly enough for Batman to hear across the thinning crowd. "Always so predictable in your heroics." Batman disabled another operative with a precisely thrown batarang before responding. "This ends now, Elliot." The false Bruce smiled with unnerving familiarity. "On the contrary, this is merely the overture." He gestured toward the floor beneath them. "The real performance is happening below." A thunderous explosion rocked the building, sending tremors through the grand concourse. Plaster rained from ornate ceilings as guests screamed and fled toward exits. Another blast followed, more distant but powerful enough to crack the marble floor. "What have you done?" Batman demanded, advancing toward Elliot, despite the continuing chaos. "Created my foundation," Elliot replied calmly. "The first connecting points between old Gotham and new. By morning, the transition will be irreversible." He backed toward a service entrance, his guards raising weapons. "You can save them, or you can chase me. Choose quickly, Batman." As if punctuating his words, a 3rd explosion caused a massive fissure to open in the floor, several civilians teetering at its edge. Batman reacted instantly, firing a grappling line to catch a woman as she fell, while simultaneously throwing impact-dampening foam pellets toward others in danger. Elliot used the distraction to escape through the service door, his guards providing covering fire to discourage pursuit. Batman was forced to prioritize civilian safety, working with Gordon to evacuate the remaining guests as portions of the floor continued to give way. "The entire foundation is compromised," Gordon shouted over the noise of creaking support beams. "Feels like they've been weakening it for weeks." "They have been," Batman confirmed, helping an elderly man toward the exit. "Elliot's been building something underneath, using his imposters to approve permits and access." Gordon's radio crackled with emergency reports. "It's not just here. We're getting calls about sinkholes opening across the East End. Whatever he's building, it's massive." With the last civilian safely evacuated, Batman turned his attention to pursuit. "I need to find where Elliot went. His project connects to the old subway tunnels. There's a maintenance access point in the basement level," Gordon said, "used to connect the station to utility corridors running parallel to the subway." Batman moved quickly through the deteriorating building, descending to the basement as aftershocks from the explosions continued to reverberate through the structure. The maintenance access Gordon had mentioned was already open, its heavy door forced from its hinges. "Alfred," he sub-vocalized, "I am entering the tunnel system beneath the station. Can you map potential routes based on the structural weaknesses reported across the East End?" "Already working on it, sir," Alfred replied. "The pattern suggests they're creating a hub-and-spoke network centered approximately 1 mile northeast of your position, sending coordinates to your CAL display." The utility corridor stretched ahead in darkness, illuminated only by Batman's cowl lenses. He moved swiftly but cautiously, aware that Elliot would have anticipated pursuit and prepared accordingly. The air grew thicker with concrete dust and the smell of freshly exposed earth as he progressed. After several hundred yards, the original tunnel opened into a much larger space, one that had clearly been under construction for months. Massive support columns had been installed to hold up Gotham's streets while an entirely new infrastructure took shape below. Prefabricated walls created a labyrinth of corridors and chambers, some already outfitted with equipment Batman recognized from Wayne Medical's research division. "He's building a parallel city," Batman murmured, documenting the sprawling complex with his cowl's recording system. "A Gotham designed to his specification, with access points that would allow his people to move freely between the surface and this Shadow City," Alfred added. "The perfect infrastructure for complete infiltration." Batman continued deeper into the complex, following signs of recent passage. The construction grew more finished as he progressed, transitioning from raw excavation to completed spaces with functioning utilities and sophisticated technology. He finally emerged into what appeared to be a control center. A circular chamber with multiple workstations surrounding a central holographic display, currently showing a three-dimensional map of Gotham's underground. Red points pulsed across the display, marking what Batman assumed were completed access points between the surface and Elliot's hidden domain. "Magnificent, isn't it?" Elliot's voice came from behind him. "A city beneath the city, pure in its design, uncompromised by the centuries of poor planning that made Gotham the cesspool it is today." Batman turned to find the false Bruce Wayne standing in an arched entryway, still immaculately dressed despite the evening's chaos, his expression one of genuine pride. "You've killed people for this," Batman said. "Stolen their identities to create your playground." "I've improved upon flawed specimens," Elliot corrected, "given purpose to lives that were being wasted on philanthropy and compromise." He gestured to the holographic display. "This is surgery on a civic scale, cutting away the diseased tissue of Gotham and replacing it with something perfected. You're not a surgeon anymore, Elliot. You're a murderer." "I'm a visionary," Elliot insisted, circling the display to stand opposite Batman. "And after tonight, I'll be Bruce Wayne as well, permanently. The final piece in my royal flush." "You think wearing my face makes you Bruce Wayne?" Batman asked. Elliot smiled, an expression that looked wrong despite the perfect replication of Bruce's features. "I've spent years studying you, Bruce. Your mannerisms, your voice, your decision-making patterns. I know you better than you know yourself. Once you're gone, no one will question the transition. Except those who truly know me," Batman countered. "Alfred, Gordon, the people who see beyond the face. Unfortunate casualties in the renovation," Elliot shrugged. "Every transformation requires sacrifice. And what happens to Gotham while you're playing dress-up in Wayne Manor?" Elliot's expression hardened. "It gets the leader it deserves. Someone who understands that sentimentality is a disease, that true progress requires precision cuts, not bandages over festering wounds." As he spoke, Batman noticed movement in the shadows behind him, more of Elliot's operatives taking position. A confrontation here, surrounded by enemies and unstable excavation, would be dangerous. He needed to draw Elliot away from his support structure. "Your surgical metaphors are getting tiresome, Thomas," Batman said, deliberately using Elliot's first name, a reminder of the identity he had abandoned. "If you want to be Bruce Wayne so badly, why hide in the shadows? Why not face me directly? Prove you're the better man." Anger flashed across the false Bruce's face, a crack in Elliot's carefully maintained facade. "Always so arrogant. Even as children you thought yourself superior, born to privilege, heir to the Wayne legacy, while I had to..." He stopped himself, regaining composure. "No, I won't give you the satisfaction of emotional outbursts. That's your weakness, not mine." Then prove it, Batman challenged. One-on-one. If you're truly ready to replace me, show me. Elliot studied him for a moment, then nodded to his hidden operatives. Stand down. The detective wants a demonstration. He removed his suit jacket, rolling up the sleeves of his dress shirt. Let's see if all your training measures up to medical precision. Batman moved away from the central platform, drawing Elliot toward a section of the chamber where stalactites hung from the partially excavated ceiling. Natural features Elliot's architects had incorporated into their design, but which provided tactical advantages Batman had already calculated. No gadgets, Elliot stipulated as they circled each other. No tricks, just skill against skill. Agreed, Batman said, though he had no intention of honoring a fair fight with a man who had murdered innocents to steal their faces. Elliot attacked with surprising speed, his movements displaying formal martial arts training, likely acquired during his years away from Gotham. Batman deflected the initial strikes, gauging his opponent's style and weaknesses. I studied with masters across Asia, Elliot said, as if reading Batman's assessment. While wearing your face, of course. They thought they were training Bruce Wayne. Then you learned the forms, but not the philosophy, Batman replied, countering with a technique that tested Elliot's adaptability. The surgeon responded well, but predictably, following patterns rather than intuiting flow. They exchanged techniques in the dim light of the underground chamber, Elliot's precision matching Batman's strength. But as the confrontation continued, differences emerged. Elliot fought with clinical detachment, each move calculated and efficient. Batman moved with the intuitive awareness of someone who had faced countless unpredictable situations, his techniques alive rather than memorized. You mirror well, Batman observed, blocking a complex combination. But you don't understand what you're copying. Elliot's expression tightened with frustration. I understand better than you think. He changed tactics, attempting to target nerve clusters with surgeon's accuracy. I know every weakness of the human body, every pressure point, every vulnerable juncture. Knowledge isn't understanding, Batman countered, using Elliot's aggression to maneuver him toward the natural limestone formations. You know the body, but not the spirit that drives it. Poetic nonsense, Elliot scoffed, pressing his attack. The brain is just electrical impulses, identity is just chemical reactions. Everything that makes you Bruce Wayne can be replicated with sufficient study. Batman allowed Elliot to back him against a column, seeming to yield ground. Then why go to such lengths to replace me? If identity is so easily replicated, why not create your own instead of stealing mine? The question struck a nerve. Elliot launched a flurry of precisely targeted strikes, his technique perfect, but his emotional control fracturing. Because you had everything handed to you, everything I had to work for, everything I sacrificed for, you received as birthright. Batman deflected the attacks, watching as Elliot's carefully constructed persona began to crumble. This isn't about Gotham, it's about your obsession, your inability to build an identity that isn't defined by someone else. Enough, Elliot snarled, the expression looking alien on Bruce Wayne's copied features. I don't need your approval. After tonight, I'll have your life, your resources, your legacy. I'll reshape Gotham above and below ground, and no one will remember you were ever more than a footnote in the Wayne family history. As Elliot pressed forward, Batman triggered a small sonic emitter in his gauntlet, the sound waves precisely calibrated to resonate with the limestone formations above them. Tiny fragments began raining down as the stalactites vibrated with increasing intensity. Elliot noticed too late. A larger piece broke free, forcing him to dodge backward. Batman used the distraction to change positions, now maneuvering Elliot toward the chamber's center, where the holographic display projected Gotham's underground network. "Your plan has a fundamental flaw, Thomas," Batman said as they continued their deadly dance. "You studied Bruce Wayne the socialite, Bruce Wayne the businessman, but you never understood what drives him." "Save your psychoanalysis," Elliot snapped, attempting to regain control of the confrontation. "I know exactly what drives you. The same pathetic trauma you've never overcome. Poor little Bruce, forever fighting a war he can't win because of one bad night in an alley." Batman allowed the taunt to pass unanswered, focusing instead on positioning. He needed Elliot centered beneath the largest stalactite formation, now vibrating visibly from the sonic resonance. "You see," Elliot continued, mistaking Batman's silence for vulnerability, "that's the difference between us. You're still that frightened child hiding behind masks and symbols. I've transformed myself through sheer will and surgical excellence. I've become something new." "No," Batman replied calmly. "You've become nothing but a hollow replica, a man without a face of his own." With deliberate timing, Batman triggered a stronger pulse from the sonic emitter. The limestone formation directly above Elliot groaned with structural stress. Elliot's eyes widened with sudden understanding. He lunged sideways as the stalactite broke free, but Batman had anticipated his movement. A precisely thrown batarang sliced through the prosthetic mask covering Elliot's face just as he dodged the falling rock. The false face peeled away partially, revealing the true visage beneath. A patchwork of surgical scars and grafted tissue, neither fully Thomas Elliot nor successfully Bruce Wayne. A man caught between identities, his obsession literally written across his features. "No!" Elliot cried, one hand flying up to cover the exposed portion of his face. "You've ruined everything!" Batman advanced steadily. "It's over, Thomas. Your imposters have been identified. Gordon is already rounding them up. This underground complex will be sealed." "It's never over," Elliot snarled, backing toward a control panel. "New Gotham already exists. The connections are established. Even if you stop me tonight, the infrastructure remains." "Then we'll dismantle it," Batman promised. "Piece by piece if necessary." Elliot's hand found a sequence of controls. "Not before I remove the greatest obstacle to progress." He initiated a command, and the chamber's supports began retracting with hydraulic hisses. "If I can't have Gotham my way, you won't have it at all." The ceiling groaned as its supports withdrew, decades of compressed earth and stone threatening to collapse. Batman calculated they had less than 2 minutes before catastrophic structural failure would bury them both and potentially destabilize blocks of the city above. "You're willing to die just to kill me?" Batman asked, already accessing the control systems through his gauntlet computer. "I'm willing to sacrifice anything for transformation," Elliot replied, his damaged prosthetic face lending a grotesque quality to his smile. "That's what you never understood about surgery, Bruce. Sometimes you must cut away healthy tissue to remove a tumor completely." Batman's fingers worked rapidly, attempting to override the collapse sequence. "Alfred," he sub-vocalized. "Emergency protocol. Send coordinates to Gordon. The surface structures above this position need immediate evacuation." "Already in progress, sir," Alfred replied, his voice steady despite the circumstances. "There's an alternative exit tunnel approximately 30 meters to your east. It should lead to the old subway maintenance shafts." Batman glanced toward the indicated direction, calculating whether he could force Elliot to accompany him. The surgeon seemed to read his intention. "Don't bother," Elliot said, backing toward a different exit. "This isn't our final confrontation, merely an intermission." There will always be another face to wear, another identity to assume. He touched the damaged prosthetic covering half his features. Even yours. Eventually, as Elliot disappeared through a narrow passage, Batman was forced to make a tactical decision. Pursuing Elliot would mean allowing the chamber to collapse, potentially causing casualties above. Stabilizing the structural failure would mean letting Elliot escape. The choice was clear. Batman returned to the control panel, working quickly to reactivate the support systems. He couldn't fully reverse the damage, but he could slow the collapse enough to ensure safe evacuation of the streets above. "Alfred, I need schematics of the support structure," he requested, fingers moving across the controls. "Sending them now, sir. May I ask about Dr. Elliot?" "He's gone. For now." Batman focused on stabilizing key structural points, but his network will unravel without him coordinating it. The imposters can't maintain their charade under scrutiny. As Batman worked, he could hear distant sounds of Elliot's retreat echoing through the tunnels. Part of him wanted to pursue, to end the threat permanently, but protecting innocent lives would always take precedence over personal vendettas. It was this principle, more than any face or name, that defined the difference between him and Thomas Elliot. The chamber stabilized temporarily, steel supports locking back into place with mechanical precision. Batman initiated a controlled shutdown of Elliot's systems, ensuring that the underground complex couldn't be remotely activated. Then he made his way toward the maintenance shaft Alfred had identified, moving swiftly through narrowing tunnels as dust and small debris continued to fall around him. He emerged several blocks away in an abandoned subway station that had been closed for decades. Above, he could hear sirens as emergency services responded to the tremors caused by Elliot's attempted sabotage. But the catastrophic collapse had been prevented, giving authorities time to secure the area properly. Dawn was breaking as Batman returned to the cave, the first pale light of morning painting Gotham's skyline with gentle promise. Alfred was waiting in the cave's main chamber, his customary composure only slightly strained by the night's events. "Master Bruce," he acknowledged, helping Batman remove the cowl. "Commissioner Gordon reports that all of Dr. Elliot's imposters have been apprehended. Quite a shock for the society pages, Gotham's elite being arrested while wearing other people's faces." Bruce moved to the computer array, bringing up security footage from the gala. "And the underground complex?" "Being surveyed by structural engineers with Wayne Enterprises' assistance. Mr. Fox is personally overseeing the assessment." Alfred paused, studying Bruce carefully. "He escaped then?" "Dr. Elliot?" "Yes." Bruce examined the damaged prosthetic face Batman had retrieved, now laid out on an examination table. "But without his network of imposters, his plan collapses. For now." Alfred's expression remained concerned. "He'll try again, sir. His obsession with assuming your identity seems pathological." "'Cause it is." Bruce turned away from the table, facing the cave's darkened recesses. "Elliot doesn't understand what he's trying to steal. He sees Bruce Wayne as a collection of privileges and resources, a face to wear, a name to use. He doesn't grasp that identity isn't something you can surgically transplant." "Indeed, sir." Alfred moved to stand beside him, his presence as steadying as always. "Identity is shaped by choices, by principles maintained even when they come at great personal cost." Bruce nodded, feeling the weight of the night's confrontation. "Elliot wants to be me without understanding what drives me. He sees the mansion, the company, the social position, but not the purpose behind them. A purpose he could never replicate, regardless of his surgical skill," Alfred agreed. He carefully began treating a laceration on Bruce's arm, his movements precise and practiced. Though, I must admit, his prosthetic work was remarkable from a technical perspective. Had you not been specifically looking for the signs, I might not have noticed, Bruce conceded. But you would have, Alfred. No matter how perfect the disguise, you would have recognized an imposter. Without question, sir. Alfred's certainty was absolute, because knowing someone extends far deeper than recognizing their face. It's understanding the soul beneath the surface, a thing no surgeon, however skilled, could ever replicate. The observation lingered between them as Alfred finished treating Bruce's injuries. In the quiet of the cave, with the night's crisis temporarily resolved, Bruce found himself reflecting on Elliot's fundamental misunderstanding, the belief that identity could be reduced to appearance, to surface characteristics that could be copied and worn like a mask. Get some rest, Master Bruce, Alfred suggested gently. Gotham will still be here when you wake, requiring both her defenders. Bruce nodded, suddenly aware of his exhaustion. Monitor the GCPD channels. If there's any sign of Elliot, you'll be the first to know, Alfred promised. Though I suspect even Dr. Elliot requires time to lick his wounds and formulate a new approach. As Bruce made his way upstairs to the manor, he paused in the study, catching his reflection in an antique mirror. The face looking back was his own, lined with fatigue and bearing the subtle marks of countless battles. Not a perfect face, not one that would grace magazine covers without the calculated charm Bruce Wayne affected in public, but authentically his. Each scar and line earned through choices made and principles upheld. Elliot could steal his appearance, his name, even temporarily his position in Gotham's hierarchy, but he could never truly become Bruce Wayne, because identity wasn't something found in surgical precision or perfect mimicry. It existed in the space between masks, in the choices made when no one was watching, in the principles maintained when compromise would be easier. In his pursuit of faces that weren't his own, Thomas Elliot had lost the most fundamental understanding of identity, that it couldn't be stolen or surgically transferred. It could only be built, choice by choice, sacrifice by sacrifice, through years of consistent action guided by unwavering principle. Bruce turned away from the mirror, leaving the study behind as he ascended the manor's grand staircase. Morning light filtered through ancient windows, casting long shadows across ancestral portraits, generations of Waynes whose legacy Bruce carried not as entitlement, but as responsibility. A responsibility Thomas Elliot would never comprehend, regardless of how perfectly he might copy the face of the man who bore it. In the days that followed, Gotham gradually returned to its version of normalcy. The underground complex Elliot had built was systematically mapped and secured, its entrances sealed under Wayne Enterprises' supervision. The imposters were identified and their victims properly mourned, families finding closure after weeks of disturbing uncertainty. Bruce maintained a careful public presence, allowing himself to be seen in contexts where his identity could be verified beyond question. He visited hospitals where survivors were recovering, attended memorial services for those who hadn't survived Elliot's obsession, and worked with Gordon to ensure no traces of the new Gotham network remained operational. 2 weeks after the confrontation beneath Gotham's Central Station, as Bruce was reviewing reconstruction contracts in the manor's study, Alfred entered with afternoon tea in an envelope. "This arrived by special courier, sir," Alfred said, placing the envelope on the desk. "Hand-delivered to the gate, no return address." Bruce examined the envelope without touching it. Heavy cream stationery, his name written in elegant calligraphy. Scan it. Alfred had already done so. No chemical or biological agents detected, just paper and ink. Carefully, Bruce opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of matching stationery, containing one handwritten sentence. Identities are built, not borrowed. Until our next surgical consultation. T.T. Bruce set the note aside, unsurprised by its arrival, yet troubled by its implications. Elliot remained free, still obsessed, still a threat to resurface when least expected. He's acknowledging the lesson while promising to return, Bruce observed. Classic Elliot, unable to admit defeat, yet compelled to demonstrate his intellectual understanding. "Shall I alert Commissioner Gordon, sir?" Alfred asked, studying the note with careful attention. Bruce considered, then shook his head. "Not yet. This is personal communication, not an imminent threat. He's regrouping, planning his next approach. And when that approach comes..." Alfred's concern was evident, though restrained. Bruce turned to the window, watching as evening shadows lengthened across the manor grounds. "We'll be ready, because that's the difference between us and Elliot. He plays at identities, wears them like costumes. We live ours, every day, in every choice we make." The certainty in his voice seemed to reassure Alfred, who nodded slightly before withdrawing to attend to other duties. Bruce remained at the window, watching darkness gradually claim the landscape as day yielded to evening. Somewhere out there, Thomas Elliot was crafting a new identity, perhaps a new face to wear. But Bruce knew with absolute certainty that no matter what disguise Elliot might don, no matter how perfect his surgical precision might become, there would always be one insurmountable obstacle to his obsession. The immutable truth that faces could be copied, but souls had to be forged through action and principle. As night settled fully over Gotham, Bruce moved away from the window, leaving Elliot's note on the desk as he descended to the cave. Tonight, as every night, Batman would emerge to protect the city, not because of a face or a name, but because of choices made long ago and reaffirmed with each sunset. This was the truth Elliot could never surgically replicate, the essence no prosthetic could ever capture. In the hollow man's lament, there lay a lesson even Bruce Wayne could appreciate. That identity, true identity, resided not in the face one presented to the world, but in the soul that lay beneath all masks, even those necessary to protect a city that existed equally in shadow and light. As Batman emerged into Gotham's evening air, that understanding settled around him like the cape he wore, not a burden, but a certainty, grounding him in a truth that neither Thomas Elliot nor any other adversary could ever truly comprehend or corrupt. In this knowledge lay not just purpose, but peace, the quiet certainty that some things, once built through years of conscious choice and sacrifice, could never be stolen, only earned. And so our tale of Gotham comes to an end. Let the gentle night embrace you as you drift toward peaceful dreams, knowing that somewhere in the darkness, the Dark Knight watches over his city. If you're not asleep yet, we will now play the ambience of Gotham City at night to help you fall asleep. And if you were just listening to our tales, we will see you next time. Good night and sleep well.